What is up, you guys? This is JP, and today I'm going to give you guys 2 tips to help you make better progress in the gym. Okay, so a lot of you will probably be thinking 2 tips. That's very general. It's probably the most common saying on YouTube. I mean, you could look that up and tip could mean anything, but these are tips that I see all the time. Again, people not do, or they just kind of mess up in the gym. And these are 2 things that, again, it's not really technique advice, but it's just things that if you do in the long run, it'll help you just, again, make better progress. The first thing that I recommend you guys do, and again, I see this happen all the time. I ironically even see trainers do this, but it's for you to write down what you're doing in the gym. Write it down. Write down how many sets you're doing, write down how many reps you're doing, and write down, there's a lot of things that you can write down, which I'll go over in a little bit. But first, the main purpose of writing things down, and I'm not gonna go into it too in depth because I've talked about it before, the main purpose is for progression. If you walk into the gym and you are going to do, let's just say, bench press for 135, and you did 8 reps one week, and the next time you come into the gym, you're like, okay, well, I didn't write it down. I think I remember doing 135, and I don't remember exactly what reps I did. If that's a consistent pattern from one workout to the next workout, you're gonna have a kind of like, again, a problem with progress. And as I mentioned before in many of my videos, is that progression is one of the biggest limiting factors to someone making gains. Most people don't have a progression scheme in place, and because they don't have a progression scheme in place, they end up just stalling, or they end up spinning their wheels for years and years and years and years and years. They end up kind of hitting a wall where they never really go past. The main kind of components or things that I would have anyone write down is, 1, obviously write down how many sets you're doing. You want to remember that. If you do 2 little sets compared to the previous weeks and you don't really realize it, you gotta understand is that volume has a dose-response relationship with hypertrophy. And then a much, not as strong, but still somewhat of a relationship with strength to an extent, but a much smaller one for strength. So if you're doing 3 sets or 4 sets on bench press for 3 weeks, and then you start doing 3 sets and you don't really realize it, then again, that's less sets, which means less volume. Now, obviously, the next one you want to record or write down is how many reps you're doing. Again, you need to have some sort of a rep range, or should have a rep range. And when I'm saying need, and I'm using these hard words, again, I know there's a lot of you who might try to argue these points. Again, there are exceptions to every rule. You don't absolutely have to have a set rep range, but on some level, you should have an idea of how many reps you're doing. And I'd be hard pressed to think that every one of you guys watching this video who doesn't write things down is going to remember how you're progressing from week to week. And remember, a lot of you asking this, I'm not just asking, can you remember how many reps you did the week before? I'm asking how many reps can you do this week compared, to next week, compared to the week after that, compared to the week after that, and then again, when are you going to increase load from there? So again, you should have that progression scheme in place, but how do you know what your progression is if you're not writing it down? So you should be recording sets, you should be recording reps. Now, another one is you should be recording levels of intensity. Now, this is variable. There's many ways to record intensity. You could record intensity in regards to percentage of one at max. That's a good one, but again, my preferred choice to record intensity is in regards to RPE based on reps in reserve, or just reps in reserve. So whatever rep range you picked, you want to record how many reps you had in the tank at the end of the set. Now, there are some of you who may train to failure. I did a whole different video on that, not going to talk about that here. But again, you should be recording how many reps in reserve you had at the end of every set. For those of you who don't know what RPE is and you don't understand what I'm saying when I say reps in reserve, basically, you just want to record how difficult the set was. You can even make it simpler than that. Give yourself a 1 through 10 scale. A 1 being a light set, a warm-up set, so easy, it felt like nothing. A 10 being a real grindy, hard, just very, very challenging set. On that scale, you want to record, okay, how did that set feel? When you can record this intensity over time, you might be able to collect data from that. So for example, if you had a week where you were recording really high intensities, and then the next week you don't do so good, you're like, okay, so what's going on here? Because you recorded it, you're able to say, wow, okay, last week I went really hard. Maybe I'm having some carryover of fatigue from the previous week, you know? Maybe if you have a couple hard weeks, you know when to take a deload. The point being is that you need to start writing this stuff down. There are a lot of people who go to the gym, they don't write anything down, and again, they're shooting themselves in the foot over the long term. Again, I only mentioned 3 things that you need to write down. I only did 3 because I don't want anyone to have excuses of adherence or I don't have enough time. If it's just real quick, 3 things, you should be taking rest periods anyways. Do this during the rest period so you're like, okay, I understand what I'm doing. This is probably one of the biggest things that I see people not doing in the gym, is just eventually writing things down, and it's going to kind of hurt them in the long term. Now, the second tip, which again is a lot more simpler than that one, is recording yourself when you're doing your sets. I honestly didn't do this for the longest time. I would do this every once in a while, but this wasn't so much because I didn't know to record my sets. I did this because of, I guess I should say, like more of a background level of anxiety. I didn't want to be criticized. I didn't like seeing myself lift because I knew there might be some faults, and I just didn't like, you know, being criticized by myself or anything. But once I kind of stomached the fact that, okay, good criticism is good and I can improve my technique, even being a trainer myself, it helps. Working with the coach has helped me, and this kind of segues from my previous videos, is that's one thing that I believe that, you know, people should consider, is working with a coach. So working with the coach, I need to record my videos. And again, I don't do it every time. Sometimes I forget, but recording myself during my sets really gives me helpful feedback on what techniques for that particular lift I can improve upon. But it's not just the technique. I can also kind of see, you know, my velocity for those lifts. And even though I'm not tracking velocity, I can kind of see how grindy that set was. For example, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was doing some squats and I felt like I only had maybe 1 or 2 reps left in the tank. But when I watched the set back, I was like, wow, that looked a lot easier than it was. I moved the weight a lot faster. So because of that, I kind of can reiterate and have, okay, maybe I'm undershooting my RPEs a little bit. Maybe I'm thinking it's a lot harder than it is. Or maybe that, you know, when there's a bar on my back during squats, I'm getting a little bit intimidated because, again, you don't want to go back down in a squat and not be able to come back up. So again, that would be my second tip, is record your sets, fix your technique. It's just a lot of information gathering, and it's good information to help you make progress. If you guys have any questions, comments, leave them down below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.